Hey, Joshua Kessner here. I just wanted to do an introduction to this podcast. This is a new podcasting group that I'm actually a part of. I'm actually leading it and hosting it. And this new podcasting group, we have a variety of topics. I, of course, am leading the one that is specific to NHL. The NHL one is called Past the Blue Line, and we cover everything in the NHL. In this episode, it's just me and my friend Dan, and we talk about some big news stories that happened last week. This was recorded February 18th, Saturday, February 18th of 2017. So some of the stuff might sound a little dated. These are roughly going to be about an hour each, between 50 and 60 minutes, in case you're wanting a specific time, somewhere in that range. And we're going to cover a variety of topics. We're going to talk about things that happen throughout the league. And we have a good assortment of people who are well-versed in the NHL, well-versed in NHL stories, NHL teams, that sort of thing. And I've enjoyed doing it so far, and we plan on recording every Saturday, and have them uploaded roughly by Monday, so that people can hear them. I will be uploading them to not only to my SoundCloud, and my YouTube channel, which is Joshua Kessner on both of those. But you can also find them on the main group that it's through, which is called Cardinal Sports Live. If you search for Cardinal Sports Live on both SoundCloud and YouTube, you should be able to find us. On SoundCloud, we only upload the most current ones, and then we get rid of the old ones. On YouTube, you'll be able to find all of our stuff. Also on YouTube, we're trying to see if we can get this done, but on YouTube we're trying to get it so that video can also be shown, so you get to actually see us interact and all that. So hopefully that happens. Obviously that won't be possible through SoundCloud, but through our YouTube channel you'll be able to see the rest of it. And so hopefully we can get that to happen. If that is the case, then on my YouTube channel you'll be able to watch us talk about it, which will be fun and interesting for you guys, I think. So, yeah. Anyways, I know I kind of talked a long time on this, but I just figured I'd let you guys know that what you're about to listen to is a new podcast that I'm a part of, and I was actually hosting this one. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoy, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye. All right, welcome to Past the Blue Line, the podcast talking about the NHL. I'm your host, Joshua Kessner, and today I'm with my co-host and partner in crime, Dan Stevenson. We are through Cardinal Sports Live, and we are in association with WCRD 91.3 FM, the pulse of Ball State. Dan, how are you doing today?
I'm good, Josh. You know, this weather, man, I don't know what's up. Seems like on the weekend it's nice and warm, but then, you know, when we're walking to class and like during the week, it's like, yeah, we're cold and miserable. So I'm enjoying the weather, dude.
Yeah, it's really nice outside. You know, it's quite strange right now. Usually it's a little colder here.
Yeah, and hey, we got, you know, hockey's officially, you know, back. A lot of teams coming off a lot of week-long bye weeks, and Hockey Day in America coming up. So it's
Hockey Day in America coming up tomorrow. Be sure to tune into that if you love watching some great hockey on TV. Speaking of some great hockey, let's talk about the overall teams on bye week. We're going to talk about the ones that just come off of bye week and the ones that are going into bye week.
here soon. So let's talk about the ones that just ended here, all right? So the Carolina Hurricanes, the Chicago Blackhawks, the Boston Bruins, Montreal Canadiens, Nashville Predators, Tampa Bay Lightning, and Washington Capitals all have just recently come off of their bye week. So if you follow one of those teams, pay attention because they are going to be making their push for the playoffs now.
Yeah.
Upcoming bye weeks. So these have not started yet. Almost all of these start on the 20th. Some of them start on the 21st or the 22nd. But these are the last bye weeks in the NHL. So we're going to have the Buffalo Sabres. They start on the 20th and end on the 24th. We have the Columbus Blue Jackets. They start on the 20th and end on the 24th of February. We have the Dallas Stars. They start on the 19th and end on the 23rd. We have the Detroit Red Wings. They start on the 22nd and they end on the 26th. The Minnesota Wild start on the 22nd and end on the 26th as well. We have the San Jose Sharks. They start on the 20th and end on the 24th. St. Louis Blues, the 21st through the 25th. Vancouver Canucks, 20th through the 24th. And last but not least, we have the Winnipeg Jets. They start on the 22nd and end on the 26th. So we have a lot of bye weeks coming up. And a lot of important teams who are looking to make the playoffs. Out of that list, Dan, who do you think is in the upcoming bye week? Who do you think is the most stressed with the bye week coming up that they're not able to play games?
I'm looking at right now. I got Columbus's schedule up, and they've been a hot team. They've come out. They came into the league this year under new coach John Tortorella, and they've been hot. Like they've kind of been that bottom feeder team of the whole entire league since they've entered. But now they were in the top of the league. So I think coming into this bye week, it's going to hurt them a little bit. Just to kind of get the momentum going, and especially with the playoffs coming up. Because if I'm looking at right now, when they are in the bye week, they have the Islanders on the 25th at Columbus. Then they go to New York to play the Rangers at MSG, and then they go to Montreal to play the Canadiens. So to end out February. So it's just kind of those are three tough games for them.
Yeah.
Coming off a bye week. I know it could work either way to help them, because I know they have been on a standstill a little bit in the standings, and they have been really winning a lot of games. So I think going into a bye week, getting those guys rested up, getting getting them rested enough to where you can make that playoff push.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see what happens. We'll talk more about the Columbus Blue Jackets as time goes on. So, but first, before we get into some of the team stories of the league, let's talk about some player achievements in the league right now.
Oh boy, there have been a lot.
So yeah, I mean, we got some really impressive statistics out of the NHL this year. We have 45-year-old Jaromir Jagr, who has 1,901 points and 760 goals as of last night. He got 1,900 earlier in the week against San Jose, and last night they played the Anaheim Ducks, and he was just, that goal from him was absolutely dirty.
I feel sorry for that goalie.
Yeah, John Gibson was left hanging out to dry. Gordie Howe has 801 goals, so if Jagr stays in the league a couple more seasons, he could technically break the record.
That'd be a big milestone, because you're talking Mr. Hockey. Like, Gretzky hasn't even, come close to breaking Gordie's record.
Right.
Now you got Jagr, who you put on that list as he was obviously he's a top 100 player because the NHL just did the top 100, and he obviously made that list.
I think that's undisputable anyway.
It's totally undisputable. So if he continues to play in the NHL in the next 2 to 3 years,
yeah, I mean, to put that into perspective for those of you who are listening, if he gets over 20 goals if he gets 21 goals in the next 2 seasons, not including this one, he could break the record. So, I mean, that's just crazy. And he's 45 years old. The oldest professional sports athlete in the world right now. So congrats to Jaromir Jagr. Next up, we have another outstanding achievement. Sidney Crosby hits his 1,000th point on Thursday night. And we got Sidney Crosby and Jaromir Jagr, 2 different age groups, but we have some impressive statistics out of that. And that leads into my next thing, which is Malkin hit his 500th assist as of last night. That was also very impressive from the Pittsburgh Penguins. Penguins have been rolling really well. So that leads me into my question for this. Who, if we had Mount Rushmore, right? If we had Mount Rushmore and you had your top 4 players who would have your faces on, out of league, whether they're active or retired, who would you put on your top 4? For those 4 faces, who would you put for Mount Rushmore?
Man, I mean, we were talking about this earlier before the show, and it's just there's so many. Like, you can argue.
There is.
You can argue on who you put on that mountain. But I think I would have to go with Gretzky and Gordy. Just
straight up.
Just straight.
Yeah.
They're there. I would have to say the Halls, Brent and Bobby, because they're not only were they the first father-son duo to just change the game in their respected time.
Right, exactly.
But if you watch them, they're fun to watch. I've watched videos of them play, and man, they're really fun.
They're good.
I would put them up there, and then probably Jagr and Crosby, because they're just showing that they're changing the game of hockey. Not just Jagr when he entered the league in the in the early 90s and continuing just to tear up the league, but then Crosby, he's still got time.
Yeah.
He's got so much time to play.
I don't know if Crosby will be in the league as much as Jaromir Jagr, but he's definitely in the running for one of the most impressive players of the league.
Who's your Mount Rushmore?
My Mount Rushmore, I'd have to put Jagr up there and Gretzky. Yeah, Jagr, Gretzky, probably Gordie Howe. I'd have to put Gordie Howe up there, and then I think a very well overlooked player out of the league, who is now retired, but one of the most beloved players in the league would probably be Teemu Selanne.
Yeah.
I think he definitely deserves to be on that list, and I think the Finnish Flash. I mean, he did some amazing feats. I think he deserves to be up there. Mm-hmm. But again, you can make arguments for many.
You can make so many arguments.
Yeah. All right. So we have now let's talk about some team news. All right. So we have the St. Louis Blues are now 6-1-0 under Mike Yeo after firing Ken Hitchcock.
About time.
Allen is playing actually quite outstanding under Yeo, and because of this, we are seeing a finally strong, well-clicking offense and defense under the St. Louis Blues. So, my question to you is, what do you think is causing this to happen under the coaching leadership of Mike Yeo? Like, what do you think is different compared to Ken Hitchcock?
Probably it's just new face.
New face?
New face, because Hitchcock's been with the Blues for quite some time. He's been in the playoffs, and he's been knocked out of the playoffs in the first round, except for last season when they went to the conference semifinals.
Yeah, they went to the Western Conference Finals.
They went to the conference finals. So I mean, that's the farthest the Blues have made it under Hitchcock. Mm-hmm. And the Blues are a good team. They have some good players like Jake Allen. They had TJ Oshie before he went to Washington. Yeah. Tarasenko is kind of taking up that spot. So I really think it's just a new face. I think the players are kind of just tired of Hitchcock.
Yeah.
And I read an article that it was like the GM kind of called out the players on it,
Yeah.
saying how they weren't performing and they weren't, giving that 110% effort. So I think bringing in that new coach and bringing in the new perspective on winning, I think it's gonna change the Blues, and they're gonna be kind of interesting come playoff time.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that you'll hear a lot of NBC Sports Network commentators talk about this is Mike Yeo he has a very simple coaching style. I mean, he simplifies the game for the players, and because of that, the players play a very simple game of hockey. And I think Ken Hitchcock, his taste of, or his style of hockey was
It's very laid back.
It's very laid back, and I almost feel like it was almost too difficult for the players in St. Louis to an extent.
Yeah.
You compare it against some of the teams in the league, Chicago, Minnesota, which of course Mike Yeo used to coach in Minnesota before Boudreaux took over. You compare some of the teams in the Pacific Division. You have the San Jose Sharks under DeBoer. We'll see what happens with the Anaheim Ducks, but they were strong last year, or decently strong last year as well, especially strong the year before that. The LA Kings are always a threat. I mean, you got teams that all their coaches know how to coach.
Oh yeah, it's that kind of, quoting Al Davis, they got the will to win. They have that when they know when it counts, it's time to count. Like, kind of, you look at Daryl Sutter in LA, even when he was in Chicago, he had that power to win, and he's doing great in LA. He's got two cups.
Yeah.
Quenneville, he's just
you
three cups in the last 7 years. Like,
yeah, and Quenneville and Hitchcock have similar win statistics too. It's kind of interesting to see. I think the difference between Hitchcock and Quenneville, though, is Quenneville has, when you watch him coach the Chicago Blackhawks, he knows how to change up his lines. He
knows how to do it on the fly, and he's like, if you watch him, especially during playoff times, he plays a chess match with the opposing coach.
He really does. Yeah, there are games. There are times you're like, it's just a well orchestrated bench. It just straight up is. It's like a symphony really over there sometimes. Granted, there are tons of times you watch the Chicago Blackhawks and you're like, what are you doing right now? Like, too many men on the ice, that kind of thing. But
yeah, they have been caught with that. Too many men on the ice.
They're the one team I keep catching them do it the most. But
yeah,
that's not to say they're bad at being on the bench and all that, but I just I don't know. I think that's the difference between Ken Hitchcock and Quenneville is the reason Quenneville has 3 cups is because he's changed his lines up. We watched in the Western Conference Final them playing the San Jose Sharks. Ken Hitchcock somewhat changed his lines up, but not enough to the point that it actually made a huge difference.
He didn't. It seemed like he didn't, do it at like that right time, the right time, right moment kind of thing. And that's like with like the coaches we mentioned. They seem to have that, like, oh, they're down 2 goals or they're down a goal with a minute left in regulation. So it's like, okay, I need to put these 3 guys in, or I need to put a whole new line to go and get the win. And that's why I think, and it's just also too kind of not just strategic, but more getting to your players. It seems Hitchcock was very laid back on the bench, and you see coaches like Sutter and Quenneville, Tortorella, and they put that spark, and they're very animated on the bench. And if you even I like watching the behind the scene videos, and in the locker room, and they're just they're in their face after a win. They're really into it in the game. And that the players feed off of that.
Right. Yeah.
Like, they take that from an intermission, or they take that into the next playoff game, because the playoffs are so one right after another, pretty much, that the players kind of feed off that. And I think Hitchcock didn't hit a weird way of showing it.
Yeah. Yeah, Hitchcock, he really reminds me of Boudreaux, now with the Minnesota Wild, formerly Anaheim Ducks coach. And, of course, me being an Anaheim Ducks fan, I got to see enough of him coach them. And Hitchcock reminds me of Boudreaux in this sense. I've always seen that Hitchcock is a player's coach, meaning he kind of just pushes his players to kind of say, yeah, you can do more, that kind of thing, instead of actually implementing his style as much as some of the other coaches in the league.
You can be a player coach to somewhat of a point,
Right.
especially in hockey, because a lot of these kids are coming into the league at like 18, 19,
Right.
20 years old. So that's like kind of the teaching age years. But then once they develop, it's kind of, okay, now be a coach. Focus on the rest of the team.
Right, exactly.
And the rest of the organization. It's like, okay, you got this kid built into play, but now focus and go get...
Yeah, now implement your style.
Exactly.
Speaking of coaches, let's move on. Let's go to the East now. Let's talk about Montreal, the big story out of the East. Montreal hires Claude Julien, and they fire if I can speak right now. They fire Michael Therrien. All right, so do you think this was a good move? And if so, do you think this was a good move? And do you think that Claude Julien will help out Montreal, or do you think that this is a useless move? Do you think this is a move for the future? What do you think about this move?
I think it's a good move.
Okay.
Because, before you had he was with Detroit.
No, he's with Boston.
No, I'm saying who's Detroit's old coach?
Okay, yeah, that's Babcock.
Babcock, yeah, he coached with Montreal, didn't he? And then, it didn't.
He coached with now he's coaching with Toronto. He used to coach with the Anaheim Ducks. Then he went to Detroit and he won a couple cups with them.
Right, I know that, but after Detroit, didn't he go to Montreal?
No, he just went straight to Toronto.
He just went straight to Toronto.
But yeah, I mean, you got. Look, Michael Therrien is there's no doubt he's a good coach in the league, and you have he's got some impressive stats under him, with Montreal, and he's had some amazing teams under him. I mean, look at where they are now in the standings, right? They're number 1 in the Atlantic Division, and they've got a lot of good wins under them, and I mean, you could even make an argument they got one of the top defensive team. They're one of the top defensive teams in the East, let alone maybe the league.
And I'm kind of reading up on Julien from NHL.com, and it's as they quote here, it's they, as you said, they have the guys to do it. They just don't have. They need someone behind that bench. And I think Julien has that because I'm looking at his overall record, and he's 419 wins, 246 losses, and 94 overtimes in 10 seasons. And he has a cup in Boston, and he has the President's Trophy in 2014.
Right.
So I think he will bring back that winning aspect to Montreal, who are the pretty much you can argue are the Yankees of hockey.
Yeah, I mean,
look at them; their original 6 team. Half their stadium is banners.
Yeah, I mean they have the most.
Granted,
they have 24 cups, right?
Yeah, and as a quote says here, is he's preaching a lot of offense, and I think that's good. I don't know if do the Canadians have a lot of offensive players?
That's one of the things. I mean, they have players like Pacioretty and all them. I mean, that's the thing that this year, and I think with the trade from with getting rid of PK Subban and bringing in Shea Weber. Shea Weber's a lot more of a defense. They're both top 6 defensemen, but you're trading an offensive defenseman for a defensive defenseman. And so this year, I mean, yes, they have offense, but this year they've definitely been a lot more focused on defense. And this is actually one of the things that I'll talk about after you bring in your point. But I think Julian's a defensive coach. I mean, you watch him play. He coached Boston. Granted, he did formerly coach in Montreal. So he came back to Montreal technically, but he's a defensive coach. I mean,
he is.
Therrien was offensive. So
and that's not a terrible thing to be a defensive coach. Like you look at the other sports like Lovie Smith in Chicago. I mean, he was a defensive coach. Granted, he didn't have the offensive knowledge, but that's where you have assistant coaches. Yeah, that's what they're there for, is to kind of, you pick an offensive minded assistant coach to like help you along,
right,
and draw up the plays.
Yeah.
So I think it's not bad that he's a defensive minded coach.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. It could go both ways. I mean, here's my thing. So we have Claude Julien, who's a defensive coach, a very defensive-minded team already. Like, they're already built defensively. So my thing is, coming into playoffs, all right, we know they can defend, right? But we don't want just teams, especially in the Stanley Cup, you need to have an overall package. If you want to get far.
You have to have the full thing. You have to have goaltending. You have to have defense. You have to have offense, power play to go far or even win the cup.
Right. And we've seen, granted, I'm also a Rangers fan, so I am a little biased when I say this. But from an objective standpoint, we've watched Boston basically flop the last 3 years at the very least.
Since they were in the Cup finals last.
Yeah, and since they lost to Chicago. And that's not to say that Julian's a bad coach. I think he definitely deserves to be a coach in the league. The question is, was that more of the fact that Boston was stacked on those teams and offensively built and defensively built, and they had a top goaltender in the league basically out of both of those teams? They had Tim Thomas when they won the cup, and they had some of the best.
Now you have Tuukka Rask.
Yeah, now they have Tuukka Rask, who's although he's not playing extremely well right now, is still a top goalie in the league.
He has the numbers to show it.
Yeah. So the question becomes, and this is where I'm not sure that they're going to have the offensive power under Julian. I think Julian's going to get them too defensive, and they're almost going to turtle up. Now, I'm not going to say they're going to play horribly, because I don't think that's what's going to happen at all. I just think once it comes playoff time, everyone's going to be in that defensive mode. No one's going to take the risk. But you got teams, let's say they make it through the Atlantic Division, which is pretty possible, I think. Maybe the toughest team out of that group is probably the Ottawa Senators, I think. The Boston Bruins, while they're in that third spot, I don't know if they're going to be that much of a challenge for the Montreal Canadiens. But if you take someone from the Metropolitan Division, teams like the New York Rangers, the Columbus Blue Jackets, the Pittsburgh Penguins, the Washington Capitals, all those teams, they all have strong offense, and not only that, they have some really solid defense behind them. I mean, you have, and not only that, their goaltending is just as solid as Carey Price has been in net. So
right. You had Brandon Holtby in Washington, who's
outstanding,
just phenomenal. So yeah, I think it comes down to having that whole package come playoff time. It's not. I wouldn't even say playoff time. I'd say now.
Yeah,
you need to start looking, maybe testing the market.
Yeah,
a little bit, just to sign a player for
offensive capability.
Right, just to kind of help you with it, because that's what the Blackhawks did with blanking on his name.
They did it with Teravainen, and they brought in Andrew Ladd as well last year.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And So I think it's just now, you have your defense, which is good to a point. Like it might work for, the lower teams in the division, like Detroit, Carolina, Buffalo, Philly. But when
Correct.
you get into the playoffs, are a whole different season.
Yeah.
They're a season about their own.
There's basically 4 seasons in
pretty
the NHL.
pretty
yeah.
much. So, if and when Montreal gets into the playoffs and they face teams like Columbus, Pittsburgh, New York, Rangers, the very offensive, versatile teams, as you said, they might turtle up.
Yeah.
And that's not going to be, that's kind of going to look
That's not to say
bad.
that's not to say if you're a Montreal fan listening to this, that's not to say they're a bad team. It's just from an analytics standpoint, I mean, for all we know, Montreal could go all the way.
Yeah.
That's
You never
anything,
know what happens.
Anything can happen in the playoffs. I mean, we watched the San Jose Sharks. I mean, St. Louis. I think it was St. Louis, Pittsburgh, and I think Chicago were the top 3 picked teams last year to go all the way to the Stanley Cup, and we watched San Jose
Come out of nowhere.
Come out of nowhere, yeah, and dominate. I mean, you also had the Dallas Stars in that running, who were a threat within themselves.
Right.
There's so many teams out of that. The Nashville Predators. I mean, the list goes on and on out of that list. But I mean, that's the nice thing about the Stanley Cups is you the playoffs. You watch so many teams, and you're like, any one of these teams could push for it.
Right. I mean, going back to more recent, like 2010, the Flyers.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I know you go back in history and you're like, wait, who won? I mean,
right. You look and it's like who played them? The Hartford Whalers.
yeah,
Really?
right, yeah, yeah. I know. It's just like what? So I mean, it is really crazy.
That's what makes. I think that's of all the. I mean, granted, playoff season of all sports are fun to watch.
Right.
This past World Series was quite possibly the greatest game of baseball I've ever followed.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really pay attention to baseball that much, and I even watched it and I was excited. I was on the edge of my seat, and I was
so
like,
it's just I think it's gonna be interesting this playoff season in the NHL because you don't know what will happen.
yeah,
You really don't. You don't have those, oh, here we go again with Pittsburgh, or here we go again with Chicago, St. Louis. It's going to be pretty much who's going to be the last 2 teams.
right, exactly. It's going to be a fight to the death for sure. All right, so let's move on. Let's move to out of the Atlantic Division. Let's go into the Metropolitan here. So we have the New York Rangers and the Columbus Blue Jackets recently played a game, and I think it's safe to say the difference is the New York Rangers are making their push back, and the Columbus Blue Jackets are, I don't know, coasting? What would you say on that?
I would say coasting.
Coasting?
Yeah, I think they kind of let their, foot off the gas a little bit. Granted, they did beat Pittsburgh last night 2-1 in overtime.
Granted, it was overtime, though, yeah.
Granted, right. I mean, they still got the points, but you can't, from where they started, like, hot, top team in the league, winning. They were on, a 16-game winning streak?
Yeah, they got all the way up to a 16-game winning streak, which is impressive, to say the least, in a league like this.
Yeah, so, yeah, I think they are, and they need to stop. They need to realize, we're actually we're a team. We're not the bottom feeders of our division or the league.
Yeah, I mean, they're contenders.
We need to step it up, and I think you have a coach that can push that in Tortorella.
Yeah,
he's very, very animated, and he wants to win.
Yeah, I mean, Tortorella knows definitely. I mean, he's one of the great coaches of the league currently, and I watched him under the Rangers, and he knows how to push people's buttons. He reminds me of a Sutter or a Quenneville a little bit, and Granted, he's not the nicest coach in the world, but I mean, we don't, that's not what matters in the
Jeez,
NHL.
Josh, what you want to reference back to in that one?
Yeah,
Something happened in Vancouver?
Maybe.
No.
Let's let's even reference he won a Stanley Cup in Tampa Bay.
Yeah.
So he knows how to push people's buttons coming playoff time. And he's definitely, he knows what he needs to do. Now, obviously the question will come up in the future, and we'll see about this one, whether he figures out a way to push people's buttons who are inexperienced come playoff time.
Because you have a lot of guys other than Brandon Saad that have not been in this situation before.
Right.
So you need to talk to your leader. I think that's why the Blue Jackets brought in Saad.
Yeah.
Is because, here's a guy that he's on a winning franchise, out of Chicago. He just won a Stanley Cup. He can bring that that spark to our organization.
Yeah.
And not even saying Saad's a good player, but I think you have more to Columbus. And with Tortorella, I think talking to Saad and telling him, hey, you're kind of a leader of this team. You have experience. Show these guys how to mentally prepare for the playoffs.
Right. I mean, you got players like Cam Atkinson, Nick Foligno, William Karlsson, Scott Hartnell, who's a former Philadelphia Flyer. We got all those players need to step up offensively here. Granted, I mean, we've seen them do phenomenal works in the playoffs late, over this season in general. And I think the biggest player in this list, granted, I mean, a lot of people would be like Cam Atkinson or maybe Nick Foligno might be the biggest players in this list, but my personal pick out of the Columbus Blue Jackets, who, if they go anywhere in the playoffs, and the player you need to pay attention to is I think Brandon Saad. I mean, I honestly believe that he was the sole reason the Chicago Blackhawks won the Stanley Cup in 2014. Now, I mean,
15
or 2015. Sorry, yeah, yeah. Granted, I mean, Chicago was a deep team then, but
right, and
he came up with timely goals.
Oh, he did. He really brought that, support to guys that were on the ice. He helped out Kane, Taves, Hossa, Shaw when needed, and I think that's what Columbus saw, and that's why they wanted him.
Right.
And granted, like, it would have been nice for him to stay in Chicago, but I think he was asking too much money, because I think he came into, I just want a Stanley Cup. I want the big contract, and the Hawks at the time were fighting the cap space.
Yeah.
And so I think going to Columbus, that gave Saad the okay, I can be a leader. I can be a franchise player for Columbus, who needs that, and a city that needs that, and he's showing it. So I think he's going to succeed well in Columbus in the next couple of years.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, and this is going to be let's talk about before we move on. Let's and try and wrap this one up. So be kind of quick with this one. Going against, I mean, they're in the Metropolitan Division, so compare them against the rest of the top. I mean, out of the top four, they're one of the top four in the Metropolitan. But if you put them against teams like the Pittsburgh Penguins, even though they beat them in OT last night, you get the Pittsburgh Penguins, the New York Rangers, the Washington Capitals. You put them in that list. Do you think that Torts will be able to put them in the driver's seat to make that push for, putting the gear into 11, so to speak, because the rest of those teams, Pittsburgh, who has playoff experience,
Who
New
just
York,
came off, who's defending a cup.
right, exactly. You got the New York Rangers. While they have some young players on their team, they still have some really experienced players who've gone all the way to a Stanley Cup final, even though they haven't won one. You have the Washington Capitals, who have been struggling to get to the finals, but have definitely been in the playoffs and make some really deep runs into the playoffs. And we have the Columbus Blue Jackets, who just haven't been there. So do you think that he'll be able to make them go into that push to Gear 11 to be able to play against some of those teams who have the experience?
Yeah, I think so, because as you mentioned, he has the playoff coaching experience, and he's got the players.
Right.
He can do so much getting to those players. It's the players that they would have to want it.
Yeah.
It's more or less, how bad do you want it?
Yeah.
Kind of thing. And it's going to be interesting in wherever bracket they land in. You do have Pittsburgh, who is trying to probably go for another back-to-back Stanley Cup,
Yeah.
which,
And they could easily do it.
yeah, you got Washington, who does have the playoff experience, New York, Montreal, but yeah, I think so. It's more Tord can do so much, but it's the players that have to perform on the ice,
Yeah.
and how bad they want it.
Yeah. I mean, they need to step up, basically. I mean, yeah. I mean, we talk about the Columbus Blue Jackets. This is something that could potentially hurt them in their positioning right now. Right now, they're third overall in the Metropolitan Division, and the New York Rangers are fourth, and they're holding that first wild card spot. And Columbus is going into their playoff, or not, I'm sorry, not playoff break, bye week. And so that bye week is they're the 20th through the 24th. That's that's 4 days. You can get some decent games out of that.
You can, and especially like late February, where you're going into March, and there's only 2 months left in the regular season.
Yeah, I mean, what are they? They're tied with New York in terms of points. So New York could easily jump them. And
looking at the conference, New York's at 75 points, and Columbus is at
77,
79.
79.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, still, if we're gonna talk realistically, New York could easily make that push if they win the next, however many games they play in that time frame, and obviously,
yeah, they can piggyback them.
Yeah.
Or jump over them in that bye week.
Which I think New York may end up wanting to do. Although with Claude Julien coming into Montreal, I think that's a wild card in itself. So for all I know, New York might want to make their push through the Atlantic Division. It might be a little bit easier for them. That's not to say those teams are any less difficult. It's just to say that the Metropolitan's been so tough this year that they've been, basically carved to be this really strong team to stay in the Metropolitan Division playoffs. So, all right, let's move on. Let's make our we'll be somewhat quick. Just give a brief description with these. So we're going to talk about top 3 teams out of each conference. Your teams that you think are playing really well right now, teams that, they deserve to be where they are in the playoffs, maybe could be a little bit higher in the playoffs. Let's start with that. Let's start with your top 3 out of the East, since we were just there. What are your top 3 out of the East, Dan?
Top 3 of the East, obviously Columbus, because I think they're that sleeper team. Columbus, Pittsburgh, obviously, because they're just Sidney Crosby and Malkin, Fleury, or they're just they're ridiculous.
They're there.
We can admit that they're
stacked.
They're playing good hockey.
Yeah.
They really are. And And then my third one is kind of tough. Like,
There's a lot of teams you can pick out of this.
oh,
list.
there's so many I'm looking at right now. Like Toronto, they're good. Like Austin Matthews, ladies and gentlemen, remember that name,
Yeah.
Austin Matthews.
I've honestly debated on getting an Austin Matthews jersey just because it's Austin Matthews.
Oh my God! When I saw his 4 goals in his debut, like,
I think that draw dropped everyone though.
yeah, it was crazy. So I would say Florida.
Florida, interesting.
I think Florida, because I think the reason I picked Florida, and I mean, Panther fans and other hockey fans can probably disagree with me, but I think Yager is just,
I mean, for 45,
for 45, where most guys hang them up and go coach their kids,
right,
pee-wee team, or in the organization,
or go back to their home country where they're from. Yeah,
exactly. I think he's going for that next cup.
He's well. Not only that, I think he's, he doesn't look like he's quitting after this year. He looks like
I mean, granted, the little salt and pepper mullet, the man
Right.
looks like he can play for the next couple years.
Yeah, compared to some of the other players who have retired in the past, like Teemu Solani, you knew he was going to retire.
Right, Paul Correa.
Yeah, Paul Correa. I mean, you look at all those players; they were ready, and you could just tell in their play. All right, so I'll give you my top 5, or I'm sorry, not top 5, top 3. I'm gonna go with the New York Rangers. I think they have some depth. Granted, I am biased on this, so I apologize. But I think it's in fair objection, I think they are definitely a threat to the playoffs. We have Henrik Lundqvist, who has recently been playing pretty well. You have Antti Ranta, who is playing outstanding backup goaltending hockey. We have players like Matt Zuccarello, who is doing outstanding. Even though players like Derek Stepan might be a little quiet, that's okay. I mean, Derek Stepan's getting a little bit older. He's not in his prime as he used to be. Mika Zibanejad's getting up there. Jimmy Vesey has been, for a rookie season, been doing pretty well. Obviously you have Buchnevich, who's been doing pretty well too, coming from the Russian league. I mean, the New York Rangers, just like the Pittsburgh Penguins, I think are a pretty deep team. The only difference is that Pittsburgh won the cup with the players they have now. And New York hasn't. And New York has definitely changed up their style. They're a little bit faster than they were last year, and I think they're definitely a threat in the playoffs. And they've been hanging around this entire year, as a threat to teams. I mean, we watched them play the Columbus Blue Jackets, and the Columbus Blue Jackets, have lost to the New York Rangers the past 2 times. So, strong teams out of the East have struggled against the New York Rangers. My next pick, I would say, I definitely, I have to give that one to the Pittsburgh Penguins. Like you were saying, Dan, I think Sidney Crosby, Malkin, even players like Phil Kessel, Carl Hagelin.
I forgot about Phil Kessel.
He's out. He's doing outstanding.
Just that whole team, as you said, we both said it's sacked.
Yeah,
so
it is. Yeah, I mean, you can't deny Pittsburgh. And then my out of the top, I gotta give it to the Ottawa Senators, I think, for this one. Ottawa's been doing pretty well.
Interesting.
They out of the Atlantic Division, they just recently beat the New Jersey Devils 3-0. Players like Derek Brassard, a former New York Ranger, who's been doing phenomenal over there. We have Erik Karlsson, who's again outstanding. Dion Phaneuf, a former Toronto Maple Leaf, doing work over there. Bobby Ryan, the former Anaheim Duck, who's been there for a couple of years now, is doing well over there. And Dennis Weidman, a former Calgary Flame. Also, we have Mike Condon in net, the former Montreal Canadian, the backup goaltender from Montreal. And definitely doing some work over there in the Atlantic Division. I think they're definitely a threat to be reckoned with. I don't think they're as strong as some of the teams from the Metropolitan Division, but I gotta give props to them. So, moving on. Let's be quick with these. Let's do.
Yeah, we only have 5 minutes.
Yeah, let's do your top 3 out of the West.
Well, you know the first one.
Chicago Blackhawks.
Yep.
Okay.
You know, I'm gonna go with you the whole bias.
Yeah.
They got the playoff experience, no doubt.
Yeah.
And that second line of Panarin, Anisimov, and Kane. Oh my God! Like it's just I think it's the most versatile second line in NHL. I mean, you can disagree with me, but it's.
And let's talk about Panarin and Kane.
Oh yeah, that they've gelled so much. Like I think, I think Quenneville is smart not putting Taves and Kane together anymore.
Oh yeah.
It's because Panarin and him have just gelled. So with them coming off that bye week, tonight they have Edmonton, moving at Chicago, and then they go on and they have a good stretch of games, some decent teams. So yeah, I think Chicago's my first one out of the West, obviously, and then Minnesota would be my second. They've been playing some good hockey. So, and then I'll probably have to say a toss up between Nashville and St. Louis.
Yeah, I mean that's all a solid list.
The West is that division where anything can happen.
Yeah,
you have so many teams in that conference, whether it's Chicago, Nashville, St. Louis, Minnesota, LA, Dallas, Tampa Bay. I mean, not really Tampa Bay, but it's so hard to pick that. Oh, okay, here they go again. Yes, it was, granted it was Chicago for a couple years, but now it's been like, what's going to happen in the West?
Yeah.
So,
and I think it's interesting this year. I mean, the Central Division is definitely probably, I'd say, the second strongest division in the league, but I think the Metropolitan Division has easily taken that mantle from them. And granted, there's some strong teams out of the Central Division with Chicago, Minnesota, and St. Louis.
Mm-hmm.
Dallas, Nashville, all of them. But it's interesting this year. I think this is a year that especially anything can happen out of the West for sure. So, all right, I'll give you mine, and then we'll wrap this up. All right. So I'm gonna pick St. Louis. I think it's obvious why. We talked about it earlier. Mike Yeo, 6-1-0.
Yep.
I'm gonna go with the Chicago Blackhawks as well. Actually, even though I'm not a fan of Chicago, I gotta give credit where credit's due. They've been doing some work in the playoff or in the regular season leading up to the playoffs, and they're a strong team, no doubt. And
especially around I'm sorry to interrupt you, but especially around the second half of the season.
Right? Yeah. I mean, this isn't. They're not messing around, and I think. For some Chicago fans, a lot of them might have been saying, "Well, this is a rebuilding year," because after getting rid of some of the key players a couple years ago, like Patrick Sharp, Johnny Oduya, Brandon Saad, players like them, and bringing in some new players, they're like, "Okay, this is a rebuilding year. We're not going to win the cup," which I think rightfully so. They didn't win the cup, but they're a strong team this year.
They are, and they're playing for something. If you watch them lose in Game 7 to St. Louis last year in the first round, they didn't like that.
Yeah.
Like, the players are saying, okay, that kind of left a sour taste in their mouth.
Yeah.
And now I think you're going to start seeing them really make that push.
Yeah, you're gonna see that drive from them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, overall strong team. And then I think my third pick, I'm gonna go to the Pacific Division, a team that I think we all expected to kind of fall off this year. The San Jose Sharks.
That's not. I can't agree with you with that because.
The San Jose Sharks, leading that Pacific Division. Granted, the Anaheim Ducks are on their tail. But I think that the San Jose Sharks definitely deserve, the crown for that one. Martin Jones has been outstanding. Players like Thornton, Pavelski, Couture, all of those players are doing extremely well, and they're doing work under DeBoer right now. So definitely deserve that. So, that would be my list. So, well, anyways, guys, that is the podcast for now. I hope you guys enjoyed. Dan, it was fun.
It was fun.
It was fun.
It was fun talking some hockey, and I think it's going to be, fun moving forward. Yeah.
So for those of you listening, well, you've probably already found it, but share this with all your friends. We'll be on our SoundCloud, which is Cardinal Sports Live, and then you can find us on YouTube, which is Cardinal Sports Live. And not only can you find our live productions there, but you can also find our podcast, and we'll have a playlist down there, so you'll be able to listen to all of them. And not only are we doing the NHL, but you'll be able to hear NFL, MLB, and NBA as well. Dan and I will not be in those, but we have some other.
I might make an appearance.
Maybe that's more your specialty than mine. But you'll be able to hear some new people talk, and I hope you guys enjoy.
Yeah, and just kind of make sure to like and follow WCRD 91.3, the pulse of Ball State, and also Ball State Cardinal Sports Live at BSU_CSL on Twitter, and look up Cardinal Sports Live on Facebook.
Yeah, all those things. Next week, I plan to we'll see if we can throw in a little bit of a playoff action.
Okay.
Get some playoff predictions going in and see what people think. So yeah, thank you for being here, Dan. I hope you come back and have more time here. You have some valid points. So
okay.
All right. Well, that is it from us today, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed, and thank you for tuning in, and we will talk to you all later.